Alright guys, welcome to another electronics video. In this video we're taking you on a little journey, a little bit different to our electronics here. So what we're working on is a 2006 Mazda Altenza. This was dropped into us by a customer explaining about a short. So there's a short in this car which is blowing all of the fuses in here. So the one that's getting blown is this circuit one here, which is supplied with a main 12 volt line, but as soon as you plug in a fuse in here it trips. So let me grab a small fuse like such and let's try and insert it here, and you notice how it just blew. So that fuse there is blown, and it continues to do that every time we put in a new fuse. So what I did was, instead of tracing this fault down and replacing with a new fuse every time as it blows, so what I did was I went to JCar and I bought one of these circuit breakers, and I attached the end of this with a couple of clips, and these clips are basically this here, so on the end of this. So what I did was I modified an 18 gauge wire and I connected these onto it, and basically what this does is this can get plugged into here. I'm trying to do this one-handed, and then the other side can go into this side here, and basically what it does, it acts as a fuse, and every time that I'm trying to trace down this fault here, every time I disconnect something and then this does not trip. So to reset this, you can press this and then that resets it. So every time there is a fault within a circuit and I disconnect that that module or that relay or whatever it is that's causing this fault, this resets. So this pops up, and then that tells me that okay, so that fault is still there. And then if I reset it within a couple of seconds and then I disconnect another device or another module that's in the car, like that ABS one right there or the airbag one right there, or the computer or something in here, this won't pop. So that will tell me that yep, we're near the fault, or that is the fault associated with it. So the way I do this is, let me just try and connect these wires in here so you can see. So this clip can just go into here like that, and the other side of it, so you notice, so if I position that there in a place where you guys can see, and then if I touch this on this side, you notice how it just popped. Okay, so basically what I was trying to show you was, so I've probed it in here using that little blades that are end of this. So I cut it off, put it on a 18 gauge wire, and so I can test it in between there. So once it's inside the circuit, see how this is automatically popped up? That tells me that it's, so basically think of this as it's been shorted, and so as soon as I press that, it won't let me reset. So it does it there, and then after a little while it should pop. Yep, there we go. So that tells me there's a short in within that circuit. So now what I'll do is I'll go around, so I'll leave this like this, and I'll go around disconnecting some of these connectors, some of these plugs that are in between these pillars and things like this, and then I'll find what is that circuit related to. So with that being in that position there, I'll grab the fuse box cover, which tells me reference to what is what. So we've got, if we look at it this way and we find that, so if we put it here and we notice that that bottom blue one is reference to our blower here, right at the bottom, and then we've got power, and then so we've got our spare side of fuses on this side here, and then right next to it says room. Yeah, so that's the one we've probed into. And so what happens now is, since that says room, I automatically know that circuit is inside the car. So all of these fuses here control the electronics of inside the car. So before I started the video, I tested everything in the engine bay as well by removing each and every fuse, each and every relay in the engine bay, but the fault was still persistent. So we know that that number 15 that was in there is what's causing that fault, and that's 15 amps. So what we'll do is I don't have any diagrams of anything where that wire goes to, which is this colored here. So I have no circuit diagrams or anything to work with or anything like that, so I'm just going by pure just trial and error really. So what we'll do is we'll disconnect a couple of things, and we'll start off by looking at, so it says room, so basically room refers to this light here. And so what we'll do is we will just get inside the car. So we've got this here, and we know that that circuit there also controls this key fob here, and we notice that this is not working either, though it's functioning. There's no unlock or anything like that, and we cannot turn the ignition on at all, so we're stuck. So anyways, let's have a look. Let's start off by taking this off, and this should just pull down easily, just like that. And we've got something tapped in here, and what I'm going to do is I'll disconnect this connector here, get rid of that, and we've got something probed in here which is going to something else. And so we've disconnected that, and now we'll come down here, grab our circuit breaker here, press that, and let's have a look if it resets. Yep, so it does. So we know that that circuit is not where that fault is, right? So what we'll do now is we'll start off from here, and then we'll work across. And so what I'm looking at inside here are some little units, and these units can be, so I automatically know that this blower circuit is that's way too high to run anything that's past that fuse that's in there. So let's work around. We can disconnect a couple of these things here. Sorry, it's so dark, can't even see. So what I'm working on is this connector here. So let's, okay, so disconnecting that green connector, didn't do anything, it's still reset. I've still got that plugged in there. Now what I'm looking at is I'm looking at this circuit here and thinking, okay, so it says room 15 amp. Alright, work our way around. We'll have a look at a couple other things. So I'm starting to think now, what other things can run off that 15 amp circuit? So I've got, looking at this, I'm thinking, could the cigarette lighter be also tapped into this circuit here, but it's got its own fuse. So I'm just going to have a look around and see what's causing that. So let's work our way up here. Let's have a look at what's in the center console. So since I said we'll start from this side and work our way here, and I've got no circuit diagrams or anything to work with, this setting here, the customer did say that the radio and things are not working at all. So that's another thing that I could look at, and he did say that the gauge cluster, the needles keep bouncing left to right once he's driving, and the dash lights seem to dim and do its own thing. And he also said that the key fob is not working at all, and the buttons do not lock and unlock the car at all. So those are, if you think about it, those are a couple of things that we could look at. So since I've disconnected a couple of things in here and diffused it and reset, and it's still blue, and what I'm going to start to do now is I'm going to disconnect things behind the stereo. Since the customer said the stereo wasn't working, the key fob wasn't working, so I'm going to start with the stereo and then I'll work onto the key fob. So bear with me while I go ahead and remove all of this. To remove this, there is a bolt under here and a bolt on this side here that you need to remove, and so let's start off by prying this console out. Let's remove that. So I'm just trying to think if there's a safety switch to disengage this, because I need this to come off for that to come off. And this just comes off by rotating the gear knob. Okay, and then let's lift this up. Okay, so bear with me while I go and remove all of this, and then I'll rejoin you once I've managed to remove this, and I'll leave it there so we can have a look at if the fault disappears by disconnecting that. Alright, so bear with me there. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll remove this panel here, and then we'll remove this. And so let's just press on the brake to remove this. Okay, so we've got that, and what I'm going to do is just pry up into this. Push this down. And again, so what I'm just going to do is again disconnect the cigarette lighter here, and then also there's a light just on the next of this. Alright, let's remove that, and then bring my switch again, and so that's the cigarette lighter disconnected. Press that, and let's see if there's a reset. Okay, so there is a reset, so that means that this fault is still available, and I will now disconnect the radio. Let me grab some prying tools, just using this this little wedge thing that I bought from the automotive shops. You can just pry up on the edges. Before we do that, we need to remove 2 screws. Okay, those 2 screws are out, and let's grab our pry tool. Just ever so lightly pry up on the edges. Okay, so I've got that one. This is quite a heavy unit, and let's bring that out. Okay, so let's bring this out and start disconnecting a couple of things. So let's disconnect this antenna. That doesn't really matter. And then we will start removing some of these connectors right at the bottom here. That's to do with the climate control. Before I do that, I'll put this gear stick back on so I'm not scratching anything. Just hold it with one hand, and then disconnect the other one. There we go. And what we've got left is just the radio plug. So hold this here, grab my switch once again, and press that, and let's see if it resets. So it's yep, so it's reset, so that tells me it's not the climate control. And now let's find out if it's the radio. So let's turn this over, and okay, the connector for this is broken, so let's use just a test lamp probe. Press down on here and disconnect that. Remove this unit out of the way. Bring our test probe and press that once again, and let's see if the test lamp recognizes anything. So I saw something funny going on with the gauge cluster. So the needles moved once I did that, and the immobilizer flashing light is there now. So there is oh, okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is position this here where we can see it. Okay, and then I'm going to plug the radio in. I just want to see if that fuse resets or the circuit breaker trips. Let's do that. Okay, so it does. Alright, so let's do that one more time. So let's press that in, and you notice the gauge cluster, I think you can see it. It starts to the needles start to move. So let's do that one more time. So let's plug this in ever so lightly. Okay, so that trips. Alright, so we now know that the radio is what's causing the short in this car. So notice the gauge cluster, once I reset this, there's an immobilizer light that lights up there as well, the key immobilizer light. So if I reset this, you notice everything starts flashing there. Okay, so I think our fault may just be this radio here. So leave that on. I want to see if that still trips. And at that point what we'll do is we'll take this unit onto our dashboard, on our dash, and let's pull this apart and see if we can repair this. If not, then right now what I'll do is I'm going to wait a while just so I know that that fuse doesn't trip again and that the fault is actually this unit here. And then we'll take this into our workbench and then we'll dismantle this, see if we can fix this and see if we can find what the fault is inside here. So yeah, so let's have a look. So it still hasn't tripped, which is a good thing, and we've still got our power coming in there. So what I'm going to do is I'll put this radio down and I'm going to grab my test lamp. So this is a voltmeter test lamp. Just going to find any ground points. So that's a bolt there that goes onto the chassis, and this wire here should be my 12 volt. So if I back probe this and see if I can show you guys as well, we've got 12 volts coming into that, so you can see it here. Yeah, and that fuse still hasn't tripped, which is good. So we know that our fault actually might be that unit there, because the door light as well as the immobilizer flashing light is on there as well. And I will now, I'm pretty certain that radio is what's causing that fault. So what I'm going to do now is remove the radio, take it onto the workbench, open it up, let's see if we can fix something there. Alright, so bear with me while we do that. Alright, so I've got the big unit out onto a table here. What I will do is I will disassemble this with taking just this unit out, and that can come off with these two screws here and a couple of other screws at the back here, and we'll pull this apart and let's have a look inside what's going on. So let me remove this big unit and then we'll come back and we'll have a look at how to remove the rest of this. So bear with me right there. Okay, so we'll remove some of these screws. Let's get rid of this. This is the fan, and this is the disk drive. Let's lift that out, and then let's have a look at some screws in here. It's that one there. There's lots of screws to remove this. And if you want to draw a diagram to where these go, usually I used to do that right at the beginning when I got into this repair business, is I'll take a photo of this and I'll draw a diagram of a square, and then I'll put a screw point here, screw point here, screw point here on my diagram, and once I go to put these screws back, at least I know where they go. Alright, so that's out, and let's have a look at what else is holding it. Alright, there's two screws here. It's always a good idea to draw a diagram or take a photo and reference it to what screw goes where, so you're not left with extra screws or leftover screws that you don't know actually what go for, if they are really critical to where they go. Okay, so that's out, and let's remove this, get rid of this cage, and let's have a look at this board now. Let's inspect. So remember what I said earlier about using your senses, and your best one is your visual and your smell. And so we just work around the board, having a look at a couple of spots that might stand out to us. And so that's the big connector that we plugged in and created that short, so the pins go on that side. So nothing on this side really tells me anything. Oh, look at this. Look at that. Okay, can you see that? Wow, that's blown. and they might actually be our fault. So that's the advantage of visually inspecting a board and using a smell and sensors like that. So if I was to go ahead, open this up, and not be able to, you know, see whatever it was that's blowing, and just dive into, or saying this, oh no, it's this, or it's the voltage regulator, or it's this thermocoupler, or whatever it is, we know that that's blowing physically, right? You can see that. So well, that smells quite bad as well. So that's caused that unit to create a short in between. So what is that? Let me just grab a bit of alcohol and on a swab, and let me just see what is that component. They usually have markings on the board, so obviously R stands for resistance, D stands for diodes, C for capacitance. So let's, okay, so that's a diode. So you can see right there, if I get you to zoom in, yeah, you can see it says D509. Okay, so I'm going to test that. Bring my test lamp out, my multimeter, set that to diode mode. We don't really need to test it, it is blowing, you can see it. And let's check. Okay, so loud beep, it's a short, and across again, and short. So that diode is basically gone. And now what I'll do is I'm just wanting to see if there's a number on it that I can see. Where is it? Here. SA4. Yeah, SA4. Okay, so I think that's what it says. SA4. By memory, that is a diode labeled SA4. So I'm just gonna have a look at my computer. Let's type this in. Say 4, and let's have a look. SA4 diode. Let's get the data sheet. And it's a 400 volt 1 amp diode. Okay, it's 400 volt 1 amp diode. Alright, I should have one in my stock, so I'll pause you there and I'll go hunt this diode down and I'll come back. Okay, so we're back. I didn't have an exact one as this SA4 diode, but I do have this one here, which is a B3100, which I think you can see it there, which should work. It's a higher amp and it should be fine. So let's go and remove this diode out of the board, and see if we can bring you here and place this one on and put it back in the car. Let's see if we have fixed our short circuit. So let's grab a bit of flux. It's so cold here and everything's frozen. So let's just heat this flux up so we can get it to flow through the syringe, and apply a bit here and here. And obviously this is going to smell the boony smell. Look at that. Okay, that's actually, hopefully there's not a hole in the board, so that's out. Yeah, just clean this up. Just standard IPA that I'm using. from JCar. That's what it is. So it's a good thing that there's no holes in the board. Scrape off all of these burnt bits. Okay, and let's retin this. So always pay attention to the orientation of the diode. So shouldn't be a feedback this way. That's what that little junction there means, like a valve, one-way valve. Let me grab some fresh solder, apply onto here, some onto here, and I'll grab my diode, and I want to tin this as well. Alright, so before I do that, I just want to check there's some fits here as well as a voltage regulator there. So I just want to check if those are still in check. Let's place this one here. Okay, that's good. That's good. That one's good. That one's good. And then there's a voltage regulator just here. I just want to check that. Reverse my leads. Okay, yes, they're all good. They check well. Okay, let's go back to putting our diode back into the circuit. Remember the orientation. So space is an issue here, so we'll do our best with what we have here. Let's tack one side down. Press on here. Just want to bring it back a little. Okay, and then we'll press down, ensure that it's seated well. Good. Oops. I think I must have nudged it while I did that. Wait for it to do that, and then press down so it's seated well. Okay, that should be good. Let's grab a new Q-tip. And give this a bit of a clean. Alright. Good. Alright, so our blow-on one is here. That one. That's our blown one, and that's our new one. Okay, so let's assemble. Zoom you out, place you up here, grab my board, and reposition this. Alright, and then it's basically just a reverse of what you took off from where, and then these three anchoring screws here that attach the board to the mainframe. We'll get those in, and then we will put CD drive in and reassemble everything else. Okay, so what I might do is I will assemble everything and then place it onto the unit, and then let's meet at the car while we place everything together and see if our short has disappeared. Okay, so you don't have to watch this boring process of reassembling all of this back together. So let's do that. Alright, we're back in the car now. So the fuse hasn't tripped, it's still on, the mobilizer lights and everything else is still flashing as it should. Okay, so now let's plug this unit back in and let's have a look if we've removed our fault. Alright, let's remove our test amp first. Remove that and bring my circuit breaker in the vision so we can actually see if the fault is still there. This unit is rather heavy, and let's plug this in and see. Hasn't tripped, which is good. Alright, let's plug that fully in, and it still hasn't tripped. Oh, good. Okay, let's connect our climate control. Okay, that connects back on. And connect this one, still no trip. Good. Let's press that there. Push all of this in. And there should be another connector back here. Okay, good. Still hasn't tripped, which is good. Grab our antenna and plug that. Still hasn't tripped, which is good. Alright, so let's push this back in. Okay, good. Right, all of that is back in, and now I want to test a couple of things, but before I do that I want to plug whatever I remove back in so I can replicate if there is a fault. So we'll leave that there. Grab our things from here. Let's actually plug this in first and monitor that. I can get this plugged in. Still hasn't tripped, good. And that one. Okay, and now I want to know if I can turn the key barrel. Oh, there we go. Yay. Cool. That's all back on. That wasn't working previously, still hasn't tripped. Still working. And our heater control now is working as well, which is good. And let's see radio. Yay! So that's back on. So let's find a station.
All Synaptics on 463. Who you got?
There we go. Perfect. Good. So there we go, guys. Let me finish putting everything back together. And the fuse still hasn't tripped, which is good. Some of you guys must be wondering, why did I use a 3 amp rather than a 15 amp in the circuit? As you know, circuit breakers are built with a thermal fuse inside. It requires it to heat, and then it allows you to reset it after it cools down. I used a 15 amp and I found that the wire was getting quite hot, so I opted for a 3 amp, which means that it requires less of a time, maybe a less than a second delay for this to trip. So I opted to use a 3 amp rather than a 15 amp. There are higher sizes of this available. I also had bought one of these ones here, which looked like such, and I was going to try this out as well, but I didn't have to. I ended up just using this one here. So there you go, guys. I will replace this with a actual fuse in the fuse holder, and then replace a few spares in there as well. So bear with me while I assemble all of this, and then we'll come back to it. Okay, so we've placed everything back together. Everything's back on. Let's try it out. So there's our immobilizer key, and if we press unlock, Alright, so that works. Immobilizer key button is flashing there. We've got a key in our proximity, and let's have a look if we can start the car. Just like engage that. Alright, there we go. Radio's back on as well, and the heater controls are all working fine. Yep, temperature's going up and down there. We've got that working as well.
Want me to perform it? Go, give us a
Radio's
look.
working as well. Cool. Alright guys, so there we go. A little bit of a different journey for us today. Bit of a mixture of auto electrical and electronics. And we've got this short sorted out for this car. Replaced it with a 15 amp fuse down there, and everything's working fine. So hopefully this video has helped somebody out there, and all of the things that I used in this video will be in the description. And yeah, well, thank you for watching guys. Hope this video helped somebody out there.